Yep. 1, 2, 3. Check. 1, 2, 3. I wonder if this is still. Yeah. I've been asked to comment and give some feedback on the Chief and Council's draft guidelines for their roles and responsibilities. So this is a document that is in draft form. It hasn't been approved by anyone yet. It comes from, essentially it started from the comprehensive community plan that Listuguj undertook a few years back. As a result of that plan, the council was asked to develop a code of conduct and a conflict of interest policy, which they've done that. So this is the third piece in the series of documents that the Chief and Council were asked to prepare. So they prepared a draft and they said, Candace, what do you think of this? And they wanted me to hold a series of engagement sessions within the community to get your feedback. And we wanted to do it more of a focus group. Actually, they wanted me to do more of a focus group. So to have a number of different people and groups comment on this. So we had a session with the Chief and Council. We've had a session with the men last night. We had a session this afternoon with the elders. We have a session tonight with all of you kind ladies. And then we also have a session tomorrow with the directors. So we're trying to get a good cross-section of feedback. And I should tell you too, first of all, that we have to be out of here by 8 o'clock. Apparently they scheduled a driver's ed meeting. So hopefully we can wrap up by that time. I'm sure everybody will be done, but want to be done by then anyway. And the second thing is, when we talked to the Chief and Council, one of the councillors asked, should we be there? Should we attend these meetings? And we had a discussion about that. It wasn't a decision that was made just with the council alone, but they asked us, should we be there? And we thought at the end of that discussion that it was probably not a good idea that they come. Because first of all, we don't want to distract the conversation away from what we want to talk about. A lot of times, you know, if the Chief and Councillor comes, people see that as an opportunity to ask them for information or ask them questions or put them on the spot. We just want to get we want people to feel like they can talk and provide their comment and feedbacks in an open and comfortable way. So just so everybody knows, it's not that they didn't want to come. We just thought, like, let's just have a discussion without them and see where that takes us. Everything that we've heard, we're going to be preparing and putting into a report to council. And you know, everything that you have in the presentation that was provided to you is going to be on the screen. So you can take all of that away, and our name and our contact information are on the back. With me is my friend Roma, and she's here. She's been a great help getting everything ready and helping with the presentation and all of that. So people don't know Roma, but maybe let's just take a minute if we can go around and introduce ourselves so that you know, Roma knows everybody and is, yeah.
My name is Clara Benson. Everybody is my mom, everybody else is my dad.
Awesome.
Calling the Belmont. Brenda. Hello. Janice Secure. I'm an economic instructor in our community. Marianne Mentale, also a Canadian language instructor. Gloria today. Sarah Swanson. Is that cat? It is. Dorothy. Denise. Her sister. Denise B. That's how you define yourself, her sister. Florida Marshall. Christine Valley. Sharon Gray. Trina Manella.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. And just so everyone knows as well, this is being live streamed. I don't know how well they can hear the discussion because not so well. So if I don't know if you want to be heard, we can pass the mic around when it comes to discussion. If you're comfortable not being heard, because they'll just hear me. Last night we did this, and I think we started off with 9 people online, and then it dropped quickly because they couldn't hear the discussion. They could only hear me, and I don't want to be the only one speaking. This is really about getting feedback. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the presentation. We want to talk about what the best practices of chief and council are. I've worked with chiefs and First Nations across the country for 21 years. So I've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot of good things. I've seen a lot of bad things. You know, so we just want to go through and talk about what some of the best practices are. But more importantly, we want to prepare recommendations that's going to reflect what you want and what you expect from the council. So it's very much going to reflect what the community wants, and it's supposed to be community driven. So and then you have the clickers. We have a series of 5 questions that we'll be asking throughout the presentation. And for those of you who haven't used it before, it's really, really cool because everybody clicks their answers, you turn the page, and all of the results are right there instantly. So it's a really interesting tool. If I can figure out how to use this. I don't know, there we go. So essentially, I've gone through this already. The purpose of this engagement is really to talk about the proper roles of the council, the proper governance. So governance really means the council, the administration, and the people. You know, all of those institutions, all those groups together make up how a community governs itself. And we want to talk about what is good governance, and where do people fit into this governance relationship. I've been hearing a lot of comments over the last few days and the last few months about how people don't feel that they're connected to the LMG. There's a disconnect seems to be there. So let's talk about that a little bit and how we can improve that. What is the role and what isn't the role of chief and council? And I think that there's a lot of confusion about what that is. What is the role of the administration? How do the directors and all of the staff who work in the various departments fit into the governance of the community? And then what is your vision and expectations from your chief and council? So as we go through the presentation, we'll address all of those. So as I said, we had the men's, the elders, and the women's. And tomorrow, what's not on here is we met with the chief and council, and we went through this as well. Had a very interesting discussion, and then we'll be speaking with the directors tomorrow, or those that are available. This is just a bit of an agenda. Like I said, we have to be done by 8, so I'll try and get through it. We may have to skip the health break, but if anybody needs to use the washroom, please go. If anybody wants to ask a question at any time, please do not hesitate to do that either. So what we do here is we start with an introduction to good governance. And I gave a little bit of the background earlier too with respect to the comprehensive community plan. And there was a lot of discussion on what good governance is. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we do want to just kind of touch on some of the areas that we want to look into further. So we want to improve governance practices. We want to provide consistent and transparent communication. Communication is a very, very important aspect of all of this. Conflict of interest policy and procedures for the council and the LMG directors, which that's been done. A code of conduct for politicians and the directors, that's been done. And how do we improve accountability? So as I mentioned before, there's a couple of other pieces. The code of conduct and the conflict of interest has already been done. So what is governance? Essentially, governance is how the nation manages its business, its politics, its people, its programs, its services, how it manages its business, its economic development, how it takes care of its land, how it takes care of its resources. And, you know, we do it as Indigenous people, we do it in a very distinct way because we try and ensure that the traditions of our people, the language, the culture are very much embedded in the way that we govern within our institutions, which are, you know, the structures, the organizations, the practices within those institutions, and how we make decisions and try and accomplish our goals for a sustainable community. At the heart of the governance is the creation of an effective, accountable, and legitimate systems and processes where people have to feel comfortable expressing their views. And that's, we're trying to make sure, we're trying to build that up. We have the structures and we have the systems already. But how do we build that up to make it effective and make everybody feel like they're part of that governance process? Because that's essentially, it's about the people. It's always about the people. You know, we have the structures, the legal, the political, and the administrative framework. So the legal structures is one thing we're going to talk about as we get through this, because one of the ideas that we've come up with is, like, when we want to gauge communities' reaction to whether we want a alternative dispute resolution process. It was described by one of the elders today as the complaints committee. How do we resolve disputes in a fair and open way where everybody feels like they can walk away and that their dispute has been resolved fairly and properly? It's like an appeal mechanism, but it's typically made up of, you know, the ones that I've seen, elders sit on it, some objective people who aren't involved in the dispute, they sit on it and then they talk to both parties and they see how they can mediate and achieve a resolution. That's to be determined, but it could be anything. Typically in the employment context, you know, the HR policy prevails, and, you know, there's employment related grievance processes. But there could be, you know, a situation where somebody seeks something from the council, they don't get what they want, they're not satisfied. Right now, they go to chief and council, right? But we're trying to get away from that because that's not the role of chief and council. There's so much to do that we can't burden the chief and council with every single thing that happens. So we're trying to say, okay, this is the proper role of each of these different groups. In terms of the governance process, how do they make their decisions and how are they held accountable to the people? I don't know. That's something that we'll talk about as we go through the presentation. And then how does the administration implement the decisions of council? So typically what happens in a government situation is the government provides a strategic vision of what they want to accomplish in whatever their term is. And then they say, okay, these are the things, they give those to the directors, these are the things we want to focus on above and beyond the program areas. And then the directors will then go and work on those. But it's not the role of council to get involved in the day-to-day operations of the administration. And those are the types of things, those are the boundaries we have to try and ensure that everybody understands. So we have, we put a slide in here on definitions because a lot of times people use these words and we don't have a common understanding of what they mean. So accountability, you know, what does that mean? right? That means taking responsibility for decisions and laws and policies that affect our people, including their actions and their behaviors. We all want to make sure that our counselors are accountable, not just in the decisions they make, but how they act, right? And that the communications is a big piece of that. Transparency. What does transparency mean? It's open and honest decision making that includes an obligation to share information with the community. That's something that I think that needs to be improved based on what I've heard. Political interference, and this is one that I'm sure a lot of people will have some thoughts on, but really when we talk about political interference, we talk about an attempt to gain an advantage through influence of a council or a councillor over one or more administrators or by people themselves. You know, we all know people who, if they have an issue, they go to the chief because they think the chief's going to solve it. And if the chief does solve it, then that's really interfering with the proper role of whatever department should be taking care of that. Could be, you know, building a deck. It could be a renovation. It could be, you know, there's certain areas that departments that person has to go to rather than going to the chief and council. Or it could be the council goes and tries to insert themselves in one of the departments, telling the departments what they should and shouldn't be doing. That's political interference. Fiduciary obligation, and this is a term that a lot of people may be familiar with, and we usually hear it in the context of the Crown's fiduciary obligation to Indigenous people, to First Nations, to Mi'kmaq. But when a council gets elected, they automatically have a legal obligation to this community. And that's a legal obligation, and that obligation means they have to make decisions and they have to act that's in a way that addresses the best interests of the whole community. Not just the people that elected them, but everybody. And not just for today, but for our future generations. That's what their role is. So every decision they make, they should be asking themselves, is this in the best interest of Listuguj? Is this in the best interest of our people? Is it in the best interest of our people, our grandkids, and, you know, the people who are going to come after us? That's what their legal obligation is. Stewardship, you know, we often hear stewardship in the context of, you know, looking after the environment, environmental stewardship. But it also refers to looking after the budget of the nation. And looking after all of those things that the council is entrusted to do for the First Nation. When we talk about the collective, we usually talk about that in the context of Aboriginal rights. Aboriginal rights are collective rights, which means that they go to the nation as a whole. As individuals, we can exercise them like hunting and fishing. We can go and exercise our Aboriginal rights, but when you talk about the impact on our rights, it's the rights that belong to the collective, which is a group, which is the nation, which is everybody that forms part of that nation. Alternative dispute resolution. And these are processes and techniques where parties who don't agree can come together and try and resolve their disputes. It could include negotiation and mediation. It could include, you know, somebody who is trained in resolving differences, like a mediator. There's a lot of different models out there. There's a lot of different ways it can be used. So that's just something that we wanted to talk about, and we will as we progress in the slides. And another big part of this presentation at the end is talking about portfolios and directorates. Typically, the First Nation, the council will look, once there's been an election, the chief will sit down and say, okay, well, these are our council, we're gonna assign different portfolios to each of the councillors. And what that is they're gonna look at all of the directors and say, okay, you know, Councillor Metallic, you're gonna take care of X, Y, and Z. And so they'll divide it up so that the work is divided evenly amongst the council. Because the role of the chief is only the role of the chief is not to do everything for everybody. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about what his role is, but, you know, the work has to be evenly divided. And I understand that hasn't happened yet in Listuguj. The chief hasn't assigned those portfolios. And my understanding is that the reason that is because there is a lack of understanding about what those roles are that come with the person who holds the portfolio. You know, a lot of people may think that they're the boss, they're the new boss of the education department or the health department, but that's not the role of a portfolio holder. So what we want to do is get your feedback of what you think the proper role should be, and how, we'll make recommendations to the council about what we think the role is. And one of the elders described it today as you need a job description. It's exactly what you need. They need a job description so they know what they can do and what they can't do, or what they shouldn't do.
Just thinking about this though, like we're talking, I hear the collective and I hear hunting. Are we limiting ourselves to the reserve or to the territory?
Yeah, that's a good question. We talked about that in one of the sessions too, because right now, Listuguj governs under the Indian Act. But I don't think we should be as short-sighted as that. I think we need to think broader, and we need to think into the future, which means we're going to be at one point in time, we are going to be governing the territory. We're not right now, but if we establish the good practices and governance, then that's going to be easier when it does come to a time where we step outside of the Indian Act and we start governing ourselves as a nation.
I'm curious, we might come to it later, but there's like the rights framework that's happening now, and a lot of the movement that's happening affects our rights as a nation, not so much as leaders of a community. And right now, chief and council are in a position where they're making big decisions about rights that hit the territory, in a sense. So, do we get that later?
We don't touch on what's happening with the federal government because I'm not privy to what the direction that Listuguj is going. I know they're talking with the chiefs about how they're going to move forward in that on the basis of nationhood, and then again on the basis of our own territorial regions within the traditional Mi'kmaq government. But I don't know what that looks like right now.
Just wondering about in terms of our participation in how chief and council govern. If we're the decision makers, if that's what people decide they want to be, then we would be decision makers over the collective in the community and the collective in the territory too. So things are moving fast, and I'm just really nervous.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are, because we haven't had that discussion. You hear a lot of people saying, we want self-government, we want an Aboriginal title, we want all these things, but we haven't really done the groundwork to be able to step outside of that yet. And people need to know what that's going to look like once we do. So that's going to take a lot of conversation. So for the purposes of what we're doing now, we're just talking about the role of the chief and council. And while it is limited right now to the Indian Act, I'd like to see these take a principled approach that when we do go beyond that, we have everything in place already. So all we have to do is expand, but we have the foundation there, a good foundation. So in terms of the principles of good governance, typically it involves being accountable through listening to the people and including their input in decision making. There's a number of principles here. People need to feel like they have a voice in the process and that their voice is taken seriously, and that's the input from the people. The government and the council and the chief and council have to have a strategic vision. They have to know where they're going. The job of the chief and council also has to be responsive to circumstances and situations that arise. They have to be effective and efficient, as does the administration. They have to work efficiently for the people. The council and the administration have to be accountable to the people in an open and clear way. And decision-making has to happen in a way that's fair to everybody. I raised this example previous about, somebody approaching a counselor and saying, okay, I need a renovation in my house. And they might get that. The council may fight really hard to get them that renovation. But if I don't have that same access, then that's not fair to me. And that's not fair to everybody else who doesn't have those relationships with council that can get those same things. So the decisions have to be made in a fair and honest and open way. So people have a really important role in the governance of this community. And typically you have, three different groups. You have the people, you have the administration and the operations, which deliver the programs and services. And then you have the leadership, which is the chief and council. So, people who want to participate in advancing the interest of Listuguj have to be supported, as well as they have to have access to essential programs and services. The administrators manage the day-to-day operations. of the programs and services free from political interference. And that's where we really want to emphasize. But to understand the role of leadership, we have the council as a whole that acts as one, and then you have the actions of the individual councillors. So this is our first question. So we want to know if you feel that information is being communicated to you consistently and in a clear and open way with respect to important decisions that are made by the chief and council.
Defining important decisions is further.
It is. We had decisions. We elect the leaders to make decisions along the way, right? But sometimes there's important decisions that affect a lot of people. So those are the types of decisions we're looking for. I guess you can look at the cannabis law as one example of that. That was a pretty important decision that affected the community. If you want to use that as an example, land claims agreements are other ones where they actually have to consult with the people. So I'd like to look at decisions where they don't really, there's nothing in law that's telling them that they have to. Like a settlement agreement, they have to consult with the people because the government requires them to ratify the agreement. Yeah, that's the cannabis legislation, or the purchase of Zenabis. That's the shareholder. Yeah, that's another thing. And you think of other things that have come up in the community over the last few years. Do you feel that the information was communicated consistently and clearly in an open way with respect to those types of decisions? So you click 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for somewhat, and 4 for not sure. So once everyone's done, we'll They did it last night. Yeah. We should have Wade do it last night, and we should have had Hillary do it tonight. Okay, so is everybody done? Has everybody not done?
Are we talking about this present council?
I don't think so. I think we're talking about the practices, right? The practices, right? There's practices that have developed with the chief and council over time, right?
What's different?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's focus on this one then. Has anybody not clicked? Nobody? Okay. There you go. So 19% of you said yes, 44 said no, somewhat, and nobody is unsure.
Because I've been to a lot of sessions.
Yep.
And there's not very many people.
Yeah.
And
You know why?
I can't. No, I disagree with this.
But you know why? Because a lot of times most people don't know about it, or we're working and we miss all the shit.
A lot of times it's in the evening.
Yes, most of the ones I've been to during the day. The biggest one I've been to recently was the Zenabis shareholder one, and I think that was because it was a lot of money. But you're right.
But you know what, Janice? You raise an important point, because the obligation is just not on the chief and council. The obligation is on people to be there, to be informed, and to show up. Not to miss it, and if you do miss it, then make an effort to find out, get the information, rather than sit back in your armchair and start.
They also, I've attended a lot of things through you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Christine, did you? Yeah.
One of my comments that my mom used to say is that she would go to these meetings and it would always end up in an argument or disagreements, and she said, I can't stand that. I miss my husband, I never can stand that. So a lot of people don't go because they feel that there is sort of a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that. And the last session, they brought in a facilitator, and that was nice.
Yeah, that helped.
They moderated it because there was a lot of anger. I was on YouTube and I heard a lot of yelling, and I was just like,
Meetings get hijacked. Somebody comes in with their own agenda and they want to be heard,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a public opportunity for them, and they take over. So we original intent of why you walked in there to either listen or give your opinion, it's out the window.
Yeah.
There's anger and emotions going on, and you just come back away from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's also decisions that have been made where there have been no community consultation, there have been no meetings, there's no flyers or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
The council here is making these very quiet real estate deals, and we're slowly expanding our territory, but nobody knows. Nobody knows from where it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. So, and that's what I'm on the definite no. I don't believe that there is enough effort to be transparent. And I think it's not so much that they're trying to keep the information. I think they just don't know how to go about doing it.
So one of the First Nations that I work for in Manitoba, he's a young chief, and not young, he's middle-aged, but he's been in here there for 2 terms. And what he started doing is he started having quarterly community meetings, and he had his portfolio holders come to those meetings and stand up and give the report on what their department is doing. And it took a lot of to get them to the place where they expected to do that, and they started doing it. A lot of the councillors fought against that at first, but at the end of the day, they ended up doing that. And so the councillors go to those community sessions. If they don't go to those community sessions, then people know that they're not there and they're not doing their job, right? But then they go, and then that gives an opportunity for everybody to understand what's going on in the community. So if you don't go, you can't, you have a duty to inform yourself if you don't go to those meetings. And so, that serves a couple of functions. And, we were talking to the chief, and he said, you know what, Candace, we did that, and I stood up there and I got land-basted for 2 hours, and I had no support from my council. And he's like, that's not good for me. That's not what I'm. Yep. And so exactly, right? So it's not like community information meetings are supposed to be, everybody has to take responsibility for that. And each councillor has to take responsibility for what portfolio they have, whether they do it or whether they bring in their director to help them with the technical information, but they have to stand up there because they're accountable to the people. What are they doing while they're in office? So that might be a suggestion of one way to try and increase the transparency by which decisions are made. And the more often you do that, the less you have to actually go and consult. Okay, because there's a thing called consultation fatigue, right? You're constantly being asked for your opinion, which is a good thing. But at the same time, if you're updated every 4 times a year, then you don't necessarily have to have these focus sessions. Mom?
Yeah, in the definition, you talk about collectivity and collective rights and so on. But in my observation with chief and council is that they don't quite get it about what the individual responsibility is to the community as much as it is a collective. So they go to council meetings as they choose if they're responsible, or they decide not to be present at the council meeting. So they do have an individual responsibility as an elected representative, as well as the whole council. So you might have 4 council members, 5 council members. So each meeting everybody will ask, so where are they? But they don't feel compelled to attend all of those meetings. And so it's great. So that's where the breakdown is, I think. They lose the connectivity with the community. Mm-hmm. And it's tough. It's very hard to, like the suggestion or bringing up that, you have quarterly meetings. It's a lot of work, a lot of time to prepare, a lot of time to do the meeting, and it's very stressful. And then you got to break it down after that, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it's a full-on process for the chief and council, and if they're not committed to doing that, at election day when they proclaim that I pledge this and I pledge that, then if they don't take that to heart, then it already starts to break down. Mm-hmm. So my point is that the individual, this is incredibly important as part of the and council body. That also speaks. I just remember you when you were on council. I used to love your Facebook because you were at council meetings updating, and that was really nice.
It's a lot of work,
but that's it.
And
And the capacity work, like HR support, sometimes, I mean, I don't know how your department's funded. I don't know like where that came from, but those supports are essential nowadays.
They are.
Like they're essential. Chief and council need staff, and they need
A good communication unit. They have one. Your IT, Wade?
Communication.
Your communications. So there's two.
and then
And then the manager, yeah. But for all the work that goes on, yeah. No, I agree with you that I think that it is a lot of work, and maybe it's not quarterly, maybe it's twice a year. But when you and you can't control the discipline by which each individual counselor brings to their role to the table. But if you try and make them accountable through these meetings, then people will see the next time. You know what? That guy didn't show up. He didn't do anything. So why would I vote for him again?
Like, they have specific rules of engagement when the person is in council, elected into council in the Indian Act. And, you know, we are administered by, in so many ways, by that act, but at the same time, we have the ability to change and make our own what we like to see.
Mm-hmm.
And the same, I think, would apply to Joe Schmo, who's applying or wants to run in an election. There's a huge responsibility. I think that's what your mom's saying, and that everybody wants to run. I don't know if it's popularity or what it is that people will make those decisions, but the load is heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not ready to do that, if you can't step up and you're running away from council meetings that are intimidating, or if you're afraid to face your people, then why are you doing that in the first place? So we can establish as a community, and doing something like this to establish what are those rules of engagement. Are we going to have pedophiles as council members? Are we going to have thieves as council members? Women abusers? Like, what are we going to do, you know, as a community? And we have to set the bar a little higher for what we want to see. If we're gonna fight the system and come together as a nation down the road, we need to be armed.
But yeah, I think council is important, but somebody touched on that earlier. We're important too.
Yeah.
And we need to be there, and we need to be informed, and we need to be more mentally assertive in how we expect them. They're our voice. That's all they are.
Right.
They speak for us.
But not even our voice is trying to mean that they run away and hide. It's not even
But that's ideally, like, that's their function. Ideally.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So they've already done their code of ethics.
I believe so.
Well, you know, if they don't attend so many meetings, they should really put themselves off, you know? Because they're not there to be our voice there instead of running around running away. Why are they there? You know?
And that's the other problem right now is how do you enforce it? What are the consequences if you don't follow the rules? Right? These are great, but if there's no consequences.
Doctor's appointment in this area after the
Exactly.
Just a quick question on the code of ethics. Are they all briefed, and are they all aware of the code of ethics when they're first elected? And how is that part of the operation? Like, do they actually, because you hear on the standard pledge for the operation is that pledge to do this, not pledge to do that, and it's just a matter of fact piece of paper that I've seen for the last 25 years. It's the same thing. It hasn't changed much. So how does that relate to the code of ethics, and how are the councillors embracing that? Because I don't see a lot of it. Like, I see a few embracing some sense of code of ethics in their delivery, and how they work together as a chief and council, because it is a body. Everyone says the chief is just a chairperson, but at the same time, he is our leader. He is the person that conducts the meetings. He is the person that sets the agenda. That's a very important, significant role. And they should all embrace that sort of ethics. So where are they on that spectrum? I don't know.
Yeah. Another example of not so transparent. Like Dave, do they have one? And do they have to sign it? And how is it policed? And what are the consequences? If someone gets convicted, are they still allowed to sit on council? We don't know.
I mean, I hear of council members, like 50 council members that have been to one meeting, I mean, the last 4 months, When was the last council meeting, the last election, right? That's 6 months ago. You know, they're, because we know they're absent. How did they get away with that? Is that part of what they
So
said they were going to do in the Code of Ethics?
let me ask you that question. What do you think? Or let's all of you. What do you think should be done if a council member is not showing up at meetings, or they're showing up and they're leaving after 5 minutes just to be able to say that they were there? What do you do? But okay, so that's, and that typically, I think under the Indian Act there's a provision, but somebody needs to enforce it. Somebody has to come in and says, okay, sorry, but you're no longer a council member because you've missed meetings without a justifiable excuse, right? That part's important too, the excuse, because people are not paid to be on council. People have jobs and they're trying to balance a lot of different things. So, you know, it's about having, you know, the proper justification.
Can there be a governance document of some sort? Governance document?
Part of the guideline, these guidelines for the roles and responsibilities, the one appendix is the code of conduct, and the other appendix is conflict of interest. So this is essentially going to be that governance document.
So within the governance document, can there be, I don't like to use the word sanctions, but can there be a sanction section or something? And sorry, but it's sort of related, but just the idea that there's 12 counselors. Like, isn't that a lot of counselors? 11. But do we need 11? Especially if we start hurting our role the way we do it.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of counselors.
Yeah, like, if we're gonna go out and do our own government, we're gonna have our own election code. And then we're gonna start talking about that. Start talking about 12 sitting around the table.
Yeah.
More, could it be less? What are the requirements?
Yeah.
You know, what kind of capacity do we want?
Oh, and that's an important piece too, is the election code, right? That kind of it's almost like we're putting the cart before the horse here. But I think this piece is a little bit easier to do than the election code, and I don't know where that's at or who's been working on it, or I heard that there's been work on it lots over the years, but I don't know.
I have to wonder why they don't look at other communities that are successful and approach them and find out how they're making it work.
Mm-hmm.
Because I worked outside and I saw the Koreans and the Scatties who have it down pat.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants to run for council, they have to take a course. And if they still want to run for council after that, okay, you're prepared. And it's a 3-month course, it's not a week.
Wow. See, one of the suggestions we had talked about, and I told this to Darcy when he first got in. I said, you know what, you're chief and council. Everybody needs to take board training. As soon as they get elected, they should have board training. And to his credit, he did it. He set it up. He got AFOA, the Aboriginal Financial Officers Association, to come in. I think he said 4 or 5 councillors showed up. Because it wasn't mandatory. And if it's mandatory, then what are the consequences of not following through? And who's going to enforce those? Somebody has to enforce them. Somebody has to be the big mean wolf and.
Document saying that, okay, if I don't show up, I agree that I am no longer a counselor. That should be right at the start. So they're obligated then. They're okay. Now I've obligated myself. I have to go. If I don't, I'm out.
I don't think it would be one. I think it would be things that are like that pop up and you know, you can't make
Well, that's depending on the use of the reason why.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, no, these are chief and council meetings. Oh, the public meetings are. That's another kettle of fish. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they don't show up for the open house. This is supposed to showcase everything that's going on in the LSU to the community members and make them more aware, and they're not even there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we're looking at what do we expect from chief and council,
And maybe there needs to be another position made for somebody to be watching that they be making it done.
See, I think a lot of, I don't know, I'm just speculating, but it could be that, like, these aren't paid positions, right? And what if we cut down the council, paid it, make it full-time? You look at other governments, they're paid positions, they're paid to be there, and that's their full-time job, that's their focus, that's their job, right?
I thought the counselors, no matter what they made, if you were making $600 a week, I thought they were bumped up to $900 just because they were in council. They used to.
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what this, I know they get honorariums for attending meetings, but I don't know above and beyond that what that structure is.
When I was 7 years ago, that was practice.
Yeah.
Everybody got paid, and if they didn't get paid, they got paid. If they already had their money, they would get topped up to $900.
And they would get paid even if just for being on council?
Some of them, yeah. There was a couple that didn't have a job.
Yeah.
So they still collected $900.
Oh.
I'm not sure what's happening now. I think and that's the weird thing too, that it's like most of the council, a lot of council have jobs. They're employees and they're council members.
Which
is
creates
kind
a
of weird.
conflict of interest, because now you have a political leader reporting to an administrator. And if they don't like that, you know, they can flex their muscles at any time, and yeah, they're going on a 4-week vacation.
The employees are the boss.
Yeah, exactly.
And then where's the, yeah.
And
it's just, it's awkward. Sometimes.
It's awkward, yeah.
Sometimes people make it work, but it depends on the person too. Some people are able to create that buffer and that distance, but other people aren't. Part of their,
Because it comes down to the ethics
of the person, yeah.
A lot of times the unemployed people don't want to run for council or, you know.
I see serving on council has been really challenging.
Yeah.
You lose your privacy, you lose a lot of things. And
I'm away from family.
Yeah. But then when I look at it, I keep saying that technically we all have more power, or we should have more power. And power, meaning that word is not the perfect word. I think we're the power. We're the decision makers. But we need to work our way up to that somehow and create the processes that support that. I didn't vote for I don't always vote. But the people that are elected, that's not carte blanche to make every decision they want. That's for them to represent me and my family and my community. And that's how I see them. But other people have different ideas. And I've heard people go up to council and say, well, you're the council, you get to make these decisions. You know, and it's usually when they want something.
But they're elected. They're elected to lead.
What are they?
They're elected to make decisions. So it's about defining what decisions do they need to go to the people to consult with the citizens on, and what do they, because there's decisions every day that they have to make, so they have to be able to do that, right? But it's what decisions should they be going to the people to seek input on. And that's why was your question, what important decisions, right? Because there are certain important decisions that affect the community as a whole that they should be like going to the people and saying, what do you guys think about this? As a community, what should we be doing?
We're also part of the tribal council. So, I mean, there's big decisions there. They also go to National Assembly, AFN, and they make big decisions there. So, I mean, it's not just decisions. We're part of different organizations. AFNQL, you know, National Chief. I'd like to have a say in who National Chief will be.
Or who our chief will represent.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
I know for a lot of this stuff, I don't voice my opinion because of the taboo. You can't speak bad about the chief and council and all that stuff. So a lot of the times I don't say anything.
And that employees are not, we're not encouraged to engage in politics. We're told to.
Mind business. Well, engaging.
Because of our workplace, because of the situations, because of the, you know, clientele, we're not allowed to engage.
We have no opinion. But I don't think they meant that like at meetings. It's more like, you know, social media and stuff like that. But you know what? That's where I get most of my information, social media. And if I don't
I don't get like the whole picture, then I'll make it a point to find what that was all about. But everything that I say is always behind the wall, so that way, you know what, I don't get slapped on the wrist for even saying anything.
It's all right, then I don't want to post anything on Facebook, you are going to get, you know. Why did you write this story?
So I find it funny that you want to hear our voices.
I was doing.
Well, yeah, but and I think that's what there's a problem in that. There's a problem in not feeling like you have a voice, because you feel that the chief and council are going to penalize you in some way, in some small way, right? Like that's not the way that it should be working. They should be encouraging you to hear you.
There's two sets of rules. There's community members as employees, that's our bread and butter, and then there's the politicians. Regardless of what they do, they can continue to do it. They can post what they want to post on Facebook and social media. They can conduct their business and their personal lives in a way that we would question, like, how are you thinking? Why are you doing something like that? And they get away with it. And if you question it or post something or anything else, the table gets turned directly onto you. If we were to do something like that, if we were to behave in a questionable manner, then it comes down to questioning our ethics, our judgment. Should we be dealing with clients? What are we doing over there?
So it's a double standard.
Absolutely. Huge.
Yeah, we're touching on a lot of stuff that is in the presentation, but and that's a good segue into accountability, right?
That's the whole reason why I came to this, is because that gag order pisses me off so much. And I don't normally speak public, period. But if I feel like I have to, then I don't feel like I should be, scared to do so.
No,
But it depends too on what you're saying. Like I am super concerned about spending all our money on cannabis. I feel I should be able to do that. But as an employee, I don't think I should be saying, chief, I'm just giving an example, like what an asshole chief does and stuff, blah, blah, blah. There's a different sort of, yeah, but if I'm concerned about how we're using the land or oil development, I'm going to say it, because that's sort of a generalized statement, and it's not it can't be construed as a specific attack on a specific person. So it's a little different. And I do see on social media, not just Listuguj, but in a lot of communities where FN chief council, FF, well, really angry, and whatever the reasons are, it's out there, and that's sort of different to manage that behavior for an employee or for anybody. And and then you see the other ones, like, I'm really afraid that our rates are being sold out. It's sort of a generalized sort of statement, and that's easier to support as an administrator.
Yeah, because you can voice your opinion. It's how you voice it. I think that raises concerns with your manager, or your director, or whoever. Yeah.
Because we do have a voice in things that impact all of us, for sure. And I don't think it's right to suppress that voice. But if I'm being vulgar, sometimes, or directly attacking.
Well, just on time, ladies, we have another clicker question. It's on accountability. So do you feel that your voice is heard and acknowledged by chief and council when it comes to important decisions?
Heard and acknowledged. Is that impacting a decision, or is that okay? I hear you. And
Well, when the community gets consulted, at the end of the day, it's the chief and council's decision. They have a legal obligation to make a decision. They consult the community to help inform their decision, but at the end of the day, it's their decision. So when they go and consulting doesn't mean that they have to do everything that everybody says, because everybody's telling them all the kinds of different things. But at the end of the day, have they considered all of those? Do you feel like they've considered everything that they've heard?
And that's what that question is.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. But if you feel like they don't even go to you to consult on, then obviously that's a no. If they don't even make the effort to consult with the people, then then obviously your voice isn't going to be heard.
Well, like, at the beginning of this, I thought, yes, you know what, that they were coming to us, but after I hear that they're making you a big deal, now I'm thinking, I don't know it all.
Nobody knows it all.
Yeah, well, I don't expect,
So
I don't
that's
expect
just
us to
one
know
example.
everything,
Yeah.
because there's some,
Yeah.
you're not gonna please
And
anybody.
there's things that are happening over there that I really think
There are
don't
closed
care.
doors, closed meetings, closed, that's been going on forever.
And there, you know what, there are some issues that they have to discuss in private, right? There's HR issues, there's stuff they have very sensitive financial information or personnel information. So there are certain things that they do and they can't tell everybody about, right? So we're talking about these decisions that affect people in a significant way. You know, whether it's expanding our land base, whether it is, entering into a forestry agreement or a fisheries agreement, or buying a business or buying a wind farm. Like those are important decisions. Or like what is the process for distributing lobster tags? What is it, and how did you arrive at that decision? And can we have a say in that? Right? So it's fair for everybody.
Your definition for accountability says, and I'm just trying to follow your logic and so on with regards to taking responsibility for decisions and laws that affect citizens, including actions and behaviors. So in that question, I'm trying to relate that question to the definition.
Mm-hmm.
Paul?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not quite making that connectivity. Because you're saying you feel your voice is heard and acknowledged by chief and council. So is the question related to the way accountability is defined and saying, are you comfortable with the way the chief and council is acting in an accountable manner towards the citizens? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because accountability is about, it's a two-way street in the way I see it. Accountability is taking information from the people, making a decision, and telling people what the decision was and how you came about it.
Now, how it affected, I guess, according to the definition.
Yeah, and that's just decisions, but people are accountable for their actions as well, how they behave on social media, right? Like they should.
Meeting they had, the Son of Us one, where they were giving out information about when we got there, we were told we had to register to vote, which wasn't made public before we got there. So a bunch of us made a decision for the community.
Well, you know what? Yeah. Yeah. No.
I view that particular one as the sole example of accountability. That was the only time I was able to put an X next to a question and it counted.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only time, aside from my vote.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only time that I felt that
It was the one I managed to go to where I was getting
was accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the oil or gas exploration when somebody brought up the fact that they may or may not be exploring for gas, or that we signed an MOU. And I remember that sort of turned everything around when people reacted. Mm-hmm. And then I remember that's when they started coming back to consult with us. So in that sense, it was unintended, but there was some accountability at that point, in a way, because they came back to us after that. I'm saying that, though, I don't know what the results were.
Never heard anything.
Yeah,
I never heard anything about any of
like
that.
a non-issue.
But it became an issue because people reacted, and it forced them to be somewhat accountable. And they had to come back and explain what had happened, who signed the MOU, and so there was that. We just didn't follow up, I guess. Mm-hmm. Or they didn't follow up.
Mm-hmm.
What side of the fence you're on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, no, if they're going to ask you for your opinion, they should tell you the decision that was made and how your opinion affected that decision.
I think we learned about it from a press release, and then people were like, "Whoa!" and we're like, "Oh my god!" And it turned into
it's been a progression, like an evolution. Their accountability has been an evolution, but they're nowhere near perfection or even
consistent. Are they being consistent?
No.
Janice.
at my age, I've seen a lot of chief and councils. And I find this is the one that has the most public meetings, the most bench
True, they
meetings.
are, they're being
And
much more.
somebody must be being informed.
Yeah.
So if you can compare to some other administration, we didn't even see one public meeting in 2 years.
And I think this is a response to people demanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a response.
So
to
what are we are we saying? I know.
It's
We
not.
can always improve.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know.
There was one chief who tried to have public meetings, nobody freaking showed up anyway.
Oh, I've seen some that
Yeah.
never
Oh,
happened.
they are.
Those
I
are
remember the one that tried, they tried to inform people, they tried to get people to come to the meetings, and well, all of us who were married to the counselor showed up, you know, and the families, but,
You see how
nobody else did come.
the younger ones won't have anything to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes too, it's like about the fun, exciting, sexy things. And when we're there, you know, when we think it's good. But some of the more boring, more low key stuff, we're like, yeah, it's just important, but it's just not as, it doesn't catch our attention as much. It's not as sexy. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember the money. We're there for the money, that's for sure. Yeah. Well,
Well, everybody's interested when there's money on the
yeah,
table.
I mean, there's a lot of people who are struggling, that cash is very important to them. What was that? Oh, the land use thing. A lot of people showed up to that.
Was it cigarette tax or something?
Yeah, there was a big turnout there. Housing, there was a big housing meeting, I know people were there. I remember a few instances, and it's when it has like a direct immediate impact on them.
Yeah.
The longer term things, we need to be there more. Yeah.
We're gonna show up when it has an impact on us.
Well, how come they can hear about those and not about the others? What was the one that Charlie was doing, going around asking the land?
Yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah.
Was it David, Charlie Bass?
Charles Bass, yeah, they had the
Oh,
meeting
Charles
last
Bass,
night.
yeah, they actually came into our work and did a presentation there, and I like that because a lot of the times at night, I don't wanna leave once I get home and take off my bra there. You know, but if they did that at work,
Oh, that's a good idea.
where, you know what, you knew in
Presentations
advance,
at the
you planned anything,
workplace.
you sat down and listened, and gave your input.
They changed the employees, and that was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
She said, a lot of us don't go off meetings, but others.
And like Brenda had said earlier, it takes a lot of planning, there was a lot of logistics that Charles had to go through in presenting to the directors to say, can I steal time from your staff meeting to sit down and talk with your staff?
Right.
Can I get you to commit the resources to pay them while, instead of servicing the clients and delivering the program, they're gonna sit and listen to this. So there was a lot of legwork that had to happen beforehand. You know, Charles took the initiative to do that. And it's a question of whether or not all the others who are leading some of these big files have the same capacity to be able to go out and do that.
If they want our input, and they really want us to be informed, that could happen everywhere.
Lots of places in workforce places have lunch and learns, right?
Yeah.
Lunchtime, you use the lunch, you have somebody to come in and do that presentation.
You don't need to tell me guys about lunch and learn. They do that once a month, and it's always geared towards community members. I don't think there's ever been a lunch and learn that was organized for LMG staff.
Yeah, well, we've got it. It's going to be a recommendation. And that's an excellent suggestion. So has everybody answered their question? Has anybody not answered their question?
I have 2 clickers.
Oh. He's stuffing the ballot box over there.
Accountability to
Okay, everybody done? Yeah, that's pretty overwhelming. So, you know, and this type of information is important because how do we improve it, right? We need to figure out how to improve that. And I think communications is a big one. We know that, you know, communications is one of those areas, for those of you who are in management, know that communications is one of those areas that don't get funded. Never gets funded. It's always the last priority. It's always the last thing that they, you know, but it's so important. And it does take a lot of work, but in order to make the people feel like they are understanding the decisions and what's going on, it's a necessary component. You see other ministries, like in other governments, they've got whole departments of communication, right? Social media communication, written communication, like letter writing, like it's a really big deal. So this is a discussion slide, which I'll skip if you guys want, because we've been discussing all along. Yeah, because we only have 45 minutes left, and we're only like not even halfway through. So we're going on to leadership best practices. We want to discuss the vision, the governing style, the principles and best practices for chief and council and individual councillors, which we've been discussing already as well. So the draft guidelines describe this vision for the chief and council, and it describes values. So for its vision, it says, the Listuguj Mi'kmaq First Nation, through its people, shall strive to achieve a balanced society where every member has an equal opportunity to fulfill their individual potential in a safe and sustainable environment on traditional lands where the spiritual, cultural, physical, and mental well-being can be achieved and where basic human needs can be attained. So I guess that's a lot. That's a lot. I recognize that that's a lot of words and it's a lot of concepts, but you know, I guess what we're just wondering is if that's something that you see, does that vision reflect what you, as Listuguj, as people in Listuguj, does that affect you? Does that reflect what you want to see the vision for the council? Is it too complicated? Is it too wordy? Is it, you know? And the same thing with these values, right? Our community values require council to maintain as a priority a constant focus on the Listuguj community, support the involvement of all community members who desire to participate in advancing the interests of Listuguj, respect Listuguj history and culture, and in my red pen, I've already put in language there, Janice, on my document. No, I was preempting. Yeah. Respect various perspectives, opinions, and beliefs, and wisely use a variety of resources to achieve the LMG established goals. So this is what is in the draft right now. So if anybody has any comments or you think there's something missing, you know, you can speak now. And if you think of something though in the next little while, like until the end of November, like my information, Roma's information is on the back, you can also send us a note and just say, you know, this is, we think, you know, I thought of this later and I'd like to have this included in the report.
So this is already what's being drafted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to know like some of the thoughts, like what did I mean by balance, or what was the thought behind balance? What was the thought between safe and sustainable environment? Like, are we talking pollution, or are we talking something different? I'd just be curious about the intent and basic human needs. I don't know. It's a lot, and it's a lot to interpret. Yeah. And it's open to interpretation.
My comment was exactly what Tanya had mentioned. About 8 years ago, one of my abusers ran for council, and as an employee working for the band, I didn't feel safe to be able to go and address him and say, you know, you need to not run for council. You are not honorable standard in this community, and you shouldn't be running for council. You know, and there is people that have histories of past abuse and violence, or either chiefs or councils, or history of sexual abuse allegations, you know, and we don't put that in as employees of social service, we're required to do police checks. Why isn't chief and council required to do police checks?
if you have a history of abuse, then unless it's addressed, or the person comes forward and says, yeah, I messed up. We're a very forgiving community. We will say, all right, where's the council? Well, I'm for chief. There's something in
Show a little honor.
Yeah. I came in today hoping to plant a seed among the women, for one, to hope that women have a place on chief and council, or elders have a place on chief and council, so that they can also help with maintaining the balance of the wellness of the individuals, but also there is nothing there that says that these councils or chief are physically, emotionally, mentally well. We'll have taken a look. We went to a community in Alberta last year, about 2-3 years ago, and the chief and council could not work in the community unless if you went to a treatment program. And then you can run for chief and council. Unless if you do that and maintain some kind of wellness within the community, how could you run programs? How could you run family programs? How could you coordinate and support these programs if you're sick? You know, I had one chief.
Know their language.
Yeah. And there's some chiefs, I had one chief prior who threw tantrums if he didn't like your decision or what you were paying for, you know. You didn't vote for me, get out of my office. Those were the common statements. No matter what, I didn't vote for you, it doesn't matter. You now win, have maturity and responsibility and do your job. And win my trust. But don't throw tantrums. And I guess, to me, some of the ethical behaviors and questions that we talk about really is about the mental wellness of those individuals that are making decisions on a community, and they should be well.
Yeah,
because then you're not no money on you. You're not taking care of just yourself. You're taking care of the community. You're worried about the families and what they're going through, and then you can make the decisions on the addictions that we're dealing with. Not going out there being one of the drug pushers yourself.
that's right, yeah.
To me, that's you talk about checks and balances and accountability. We all know some people's history, and one's selling drugs, one's passing, one's prostituting and hanging out with prostitutes, and the other one's doing this. And I'm not naming who's doing what. I'm just saying these are the real issues that we're dealing with in our community. And then we have, like I had to thank God there's individuals that ran for council didn't get in. But how would it state that if my abuser came in, how could he go and make conscious decisions on wellness in our community if he has never taken responsibility for his actions?
It's an excellent point.
Make sure that all got recorded.
Can you hear Roma typing away? She can't type fast enough. Okay, Mom.
It's a lot. It's a lot even for me, because if you want to, take any word there, is anybody living up to it? Are they going to live up to it? Are we going to live up to it? We've just had a whole conversation about, about how derelict their obligations have become, whether they're previous student councils, current student council, whatever. So, like, for me, it's too much, it's too busy, there's too much there in the vision and the values. So are the traditional values, are the community values that they're putting forward? The vision, it's a mouthful when you start talking about traditional lands, like, okay, there's no control about traditional lands. First of all, we live in a postage stamp environment here. How does whoever dreamt this or drafted it is dreaming in technicolor and delusional if they think that they're going to control everything that goes on in traditional lands, because that's what that's saying. It's my vision that I can control all of Listuguj. No, we can only control what we see and what we know and how we live within this whole community, and it's only ourselves that we begin with. It's a lot. It's a lot. That would be my most important criticism about that. It's unrealistic, and it's, I don't know. And I question like the values of it. Are they, like I said a while ago, are they traditional values? Like, are they, like, because values have changed over the millennials. They have changed. Now we're more into thinking in a traditional way, like more preserving and maintaining and repatriating, the language, the culture, and that's not enough. That the community values is not enough now in 2018. That is probably a script from, I don't know,
Kind of generic, actually.
almost. Yeah. So I don't know. This needs to be revisited, in my opinion.
I'm one of the few nuts in this room who probably read the book that is the vision and mission and philosophy that's the preface to the LMG personnel policy manuals. It's like 6 pages long.
Really?
It's crazy. That vision should be a one-point statement. The vision of a healthy, sustainable First Nation community looking forward to the future, period. What they're saying there is part of the mission, how we're going to get to that vision. So it tells me that if they went through this exercise, they don't have a clear idea of what the vision should be. And I know that they went through vision and mission exercises when they did the comprehensive community planning. So where is all that work? Where is all that community input that went into developing the vision and mission? Because like this group, they asked different focus groups, what is your vision for the future? Keywords came up: healthy, safe, sustainable, culturally relevant.
Relationship building.
Yeah, that's it. And those were the keywords that came up that they could percolate down into a 6-word vision for our community that's we're going to continue to work towards. We're never going to get there, but boy, we're always going to continue to fight for that same vision.
Yeah, because if you take the word vision, in the concept of a Mi'kmaq person or a traditional person, for that matter, or an indigenous person, they would say, boy, that doesn't even mean that I don't see the whole world in front of me. This is what they're saying. So that's why I questioned it. I said, holy jumping, the vision is very, very, very broad.
And it doesn't even speak of family.
Well, and there's other key things in here too, like integrity. It's not in there, right? Honesty, like some of those core values, they're not. Yeah.
Many workshops. Yeah, I just want to make a comment that like somebody has developed this without actually doing the proper research, because there's been a lot of workshops that have been held here, right here in this community, on values, values, right? And like the family people, the family department, the health people, there's been a lot of work done in that area, and I don't see that reflected in those values. Which is odd. It's like, again, we're trying to reinvent the wheel again, but we're not looking at what the community has shared all those years.
No, but there's a key component to it, and when you start speaking the language, it usually defines what it is. When we go and translate to English, we lose it. Because there is keywords in our language that pinpoint exactly what it is that we're supposed to be looking for. And unfortunately, majority of the people speak English, so we have to look at the vision and all that. But I think we are also missing the boat, because what we're asking our clients, what we're asking family members is to get well. Find your purpose. What are we meant to do? You hear across the country, oh my God, Listuguj is such a great community. It's thriving. It has a lot of good things happening. Yes, it does. But there's still a lot of work. There's still a lot of things that we but we still about our relationships. It's still about the history that we need to repair. There's still trauma that has been in there that we haven't dealt with. And how are we going to deal with this? It's not more money I'm seeing, you must think of all of it. You just don't take care of yourself. That's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is that we're trying to get to, for them to have directions.
So do you think this vision should be just, not this exact vision, but do you think a vision should be just used and described in our language? At least first, as the first kind of iteration, and then an attempt at a translation.
Are you planning a session on Lima? Anyone? You can get an assistant. There's few speakers left right here, Mom. You hold one in the language.
That's an idea.
Language speakers won't hold back. Sometimes they'll be more open to if it's in their language. I said, like the elders, I'm sure they had a lot to say, and maybe more if you had it in the language. But that's my theory. Yeah.
No, that's a great idea.
How they have to behave is how they have to behave. That's just okay. But that, by saying that, means that their behavior is okay. But it doesn't.
What do you think?
Like they're shy and they're scared to say what they really want to say.
No, it's not that they'll be labeled, it's just that maybe just they don't know how to say it in English. Because they're first language speakers, there's still a few out there.
But that's the key point is Megudelsi, Listuguj. When you say that, that is a definition as to who you are and where you come from. That wouldn't make sense. When you say that, that is literally who we are as Mi'kmaq people. You're setting a standard. We're not at that standard. Because we're not proud of who we are, and that we're ashamed of who we are, and there is a lot of trauma that took place that we have to repair. So Megudelsi Listuguj is not a real existence for us. We want to be. We want to get there.
It's a vision of where we want to be.
Yeah.
It's where we
want to be proud of who we are. We want to be acknowledged for who we are and where we come from. Even if you just do something in that, and I said, when you use the language is the key in terms of, and I don't want anybody to feel bad that they don't speak the language. It's just that these are the terms that I grew up with that stood out, that said, Megudelsi Listuguj. Be proud, because that's what she was saying about her grandmother. You know, that she walked into the store and felt proud of who she was. Even if she didn't understand what the store was doing or robbing her or whatever. She was still proud of who she was. And I think it's safe to say that chief and council don't have that pride. And it still goes back to numbers.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be swindled.
Is it about that not fitting for, you know, there's something to be said about that, what we carry in us, you know, some of you are lucky and have the language, it's blood, it's in the blood, it's all in our, it's in all of our blood. And it's the same thing with our history, I think, and if it doesn't fit, we're trying to put boots on that just don't fit us. So how do we get there with the mindset that it's culturally relevant, it's uniquely Mi'kmaq. So we're sitting around a table in a council type of a situation where we're having a conversation and everybody is an equal player at this table. And I don't think that doing things cookie cutter Western way is always the way for us. And it doesn't feel right, and I think that we get caught up in semantics, catchwords, phrases that are of the day, of the time. And what you guys are talking about, I think, is valid and real in that there's something to be said about what happened, how that gets carried on generations. You know, where that meaning, and I can't speak to that. I don't have that privilege of knowing that, what that means when you coin something in the language, but the relevance of it, you know, and she doesn't speak it. She's a youth, you know, so going forward, how do we walk in both worlds that's gonna look to the seventh generation, you know, that's going to speak about that. And I don't think that this necessarily fits in the way that feels right. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Like if we ask your daughter, like, how do you relate to that? You know, like, do you relate to it? I don't know what her opinion is.
You're on the spot.
No, I don't want to put you on the spot. No, but
You're on the spot.
But Tan, when you said the word youth, it'd be interesting to see how they would relate to that vision. Like that's a lot. Just the word "a lot" comes to my mind. It's above everybody's
And it should
relativity.
Be, it should be a point, one point that every person would have in their head every day.
Yeah.
We would know it.
You're not gonna remember that.
Listuguj Mi'kmaq First Nation, and then you lost me after that.
Yeah,
There you go, big boots. Yeah. But that one sentence, that one punch, that's going to. What is the point of the arrow? This is like the whole shaft of the arrow here. You just need the point.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's half an hour. Okay.
We picked the can.
The vision's out.
Yeah, the vision's out. We need another workshop to develop the vision in the language. Okay. Okay, so we're only on slide 18 and there's like 35 slides. So I'm not sure if you want me to focus on anything in particular, you know. The main thing from here is that, you know, the council has to make decisions that are in the best interest of the community. That's their key role. That's their legal obligation. Under the current structure, the chief's role is limited, right? They and I take your point, Mom, that it's limited in terms of what the Indian Act says it is, but there's actually a lot more to it than just that. Sorry. But you know, the main role is to chair those meetings, and he doesn't vote unless there's a tie. He's a spokesperson for the council, for the community, both within the community and outside of the community. And you know, there's again these kind of draw on those values that were in the previous slide, that council will govern with an emphasis on collective leadership, respecting different viewpoints, respecting the roles of the council and the administration, and sustainable development of Listuguj. So that's kind of what their main role is. You know, their style, well, yeah, they should be doing it based on the values, but whether that's done or not is not always done properly.
Honest to God, Ken, I'm sorry, but this looks like something out of the text of the Indian Act. Doesn't it? Doesn't it remind you of the language of the Indian Act? Some cats on the line.
Well,
come on.
so a consultant put it together.
Pardon me?
So a consultant put it together, right?
Somebody at within the, yeah, it could be. I don't know who put it together. It was given to us, and
Put it together.
their own
governance
research.
style.
Then they give them a document which they come forward, you can take this and you can take it to your people and they can discuss it. But they had somebody else put it together for them. And more than likely it was a non-Indian. So.
He's an expert in Aboriginal issues.
Yeah.
So much for Tanya, so much for your high bar. Everything there doesn't even measure up.
You're making her look on page
Because it's very English.
Yeah.
You know, it's very English and it's very, I've seen a lot of consultants' papers and I have to say, very nice. It's very pretty to look at, but it's a lot of blah, blah, blah.
I think they need to spend 6 weeks in a treatment program, they need to be, spend some time with elders, they need to go traditionally into ceremonies. They need to know what life is like on the streets for homeless people, they need to know what living on a budget is about, under $500 for a month. Then you can go run for council.
Let me ask you this question. What is the role of the, and this might be a hot button question, but what is the role of the traditional government?
You know, in Con River, there's a chief that is he's a traditional chief in Con River. And he does the Indian chief and council act, but they run a lot on culture and ceremony. They still do it economically and everything, but they really promote the chief and council.
Do they have their own election code then?
Yeah, they're still run by the Indian Act, but they make it a point that their chief and council are looking at their issues and dealing with issues in the community and as well as things.
They made it work.
Yeah.
They involve the people.
Yeah.
But again, I think it comes down to this election code. And that's where, expectations from chief and council and setting the bar and saying, these are the minimum requirements, this is the basic training we'd like to see you have, that before we look at you as our leaders. Because, honestly, we're looking at some of these people and I wouldn't let them cat down a hole.
Last election, I went through it and went, oh my God.
Yeah.
Who the hell do you vote for?
Yeah, when you get 73 people running for 12 positions, and you can't even find 12 good ones.
Right. You're picking 3, maybe 4 people.
That's
so then the others get in by default.
But it's like a joke, and it shouldn't be. This is such
it's serious.
That's what we're discussing.
And I think that all of those parameters can be established at that electoral code.
I know when you impose like 12 council members and the chief and council onto their role and responsibility, someone just said it's a joke because, like their responsibility, look at what it is. It's lawmaking, it's financial stewardship, it's strategic planning, it's administration, which is a mega, what is it now, must be about $50 million administrative budget. And, it should be a fairly used communications component to that. That's a big responsibility and accommodation to the people. Do the council members actually, can they carry that out?
I would love to have been a fly on the wall when you did this presentation to
Why do we need 12 counselors? Why do we need 12 counselors? You see a lot of these white cities where they have a council of maybe 5, 6 people and a mayor. Why do we need, we're a small community, why do we need 12 counselors?
So we can have 4 or 5 at council meetings.
Well, that's sad. That's really sad.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
How did they justify having 12 council? Is it 100 per?
One counselor per 100 people.
No, but our community's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, but you see some small cities, they don't have, they have a mayor and so many council in there and they don't have 12.
Oh, I know, I mean, look,
We've got a few thousand, 100,000 people.
A small community where in New Brunswick there's only three rangers and a couple of variants.
Yeah. So, maybe all that honorarium money could be put in programs.
In the communications budget. Yeah. And that there's two pages of the responsibilities actually. Right? It's a lot. It's a lot, and yep.
So how did the men's session turn out? I mean, how was it?
Were they as vocal as we are?
Yeah. I'm curious too.
Well, we only had 6 men show up.
Oh, there you go. No, the other. Yeah.
6. Oh yeah.
This was the best
8.
turnout of women.
This was absolutely, this is the best turnout. Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of expected that.
And I was part of both.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, no, we had a good, yeah, no, it was good. It was good today, and it was interesting. The men's session was interesting. You know, there was some, Lloyd Alcon came, so he had some interesting perspectives. But it was good. I mean, yeah, let's talk about it after this, when we have a couple more minutes. Yeah, because we've only got 15 minutes. Oh my gosh, we're on slide 21. We have 2 more questions. Do you want me to skip to the questions? Okay. All right. Do you think that LMG would benefit from having a neutral, independent body to support complaints, procedures, and resolve disputes?
Well, you could take some counselors and put them on this board, the counselors, and you got.
A neutral, independent body.
Yeah.
That's the 3 key words.
Yeah.
Neutral, independent body.
They don't have any contribution by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, has anybody not clicked? Not, has anybody not clicked? I can turn the...
Upside down.
Okay, are we ready? Oh. Ready? Okay. Oh, health break. 10 seconds. It's done. Yeah, well, that's... do you want to spend a little bit of time discussing portfolios, or do you just want me to run to the question? Yeah. Okay. Because these are all the departments, right? So that's a lot. That's a lot of work. Takes a lot of manpower to do all that. They don't have any right now. But you'd have to assign a couple to each, at least 2. Some departments are so big, they may need even 2 people on it, you know? Portfolio management. No, if there were portfolios assigned, who would you approach to raise a particular issue? See, we didn't do all the discussion that preceded this because but we talked about the portfolios earlier and how, you know, their role is not to be the boss of the department. So.
But there's always a chain of command that it's very easy to go right to the top because you know he's just sitting right there.
Yeah. But that takes discipline on the part of the council too, or the chief, to say, you know what, you have to go. And then one of the men last night said, well, we can't even talk to them anymore. They won't talk to us. They won't they won't do anything for us anymore. And that's the culture that's been, you know.
Yeah, because they're trying to send them back to administration.
Yeah, and people don't like that because that's not the way things have been done. Okay, has everybody clicked? Have everybody not clicked?
Yeah.
Okay, everyone's clicked? Nope. Question 4, yeah.
I still believe in council members. I'll give it.
Okay, can I go? Yeah. So this is council member with the portfolio. There's the band manager and the director, and not sure. So how it's supposed to go is you're supposed to go to the director in a good governance situation, right? You go to the director first. If your issue isn't resolved there, then you go to the band manager, because the band manager is the person who has, manages all of the directors and everybody. And then if that doesn't work, then you'd go to this new complaints resolution system.
Isn't that already in? Unwritten rule?
It's unwritten, yeah, I think it's unwritten.
We have to deal with Donna first before we go anywhere.
Exactly, yeah.
But that's as an employee, but as a citizen. As a citizen, not as an employee.
You don't know who to approach, or you approach the guy who's supposed to be the director of
Yeah.
that program that you have a problem.
Like if you need some medical transportation, right, just as a regular citizen, then you'd go to the director of health. And if you couldn't get your answer, then you'd say, okay, I want to go to the band manager, the chief operating officer. If you go to the council member with the portfolio, that council member should be directing you back to the director, right? So then you got to go, it's just another layer on top of that. So then you go back to the director, then you follow those steps again. Okay, last question. Do you have concerns that there is political interference by your council in the day-to-day management of directors? Or too hard?
I think in some ways, the whole way fine, and then we help her more because we know what's more going on. I want. I know the chief did.
But sometimes, like, if Tanya went to one of the counselors, and then they go and say, okay, Tanya wants Ram, give it to her. That's political interference.
Right, or, Candy's the director, and he said, no, sorry, unfortunately, that doesn't apply in this circumstance. Then, whatever, jump over, go to so-and-so, and that decision is then overturned.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you get your grant, whether or not you
met the criteria and whether or not there's
Yeah.
money in the budget and.
Yeah, and it sets a precedent for everybody else, and they go, why then different rules?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're right back on that.
Or you pick the counselor who you know is the loudest and who's gonna, like, that's what the guys are saying last night. Everybody knows who the counselor is that's going to yell the loudest and, bully.
Make a fuss, just to make a fuss.
Only shows up when it's time to yell.
Yeah.
And there's the whole, and I know that this is a huge gray area, but if it's my sister who's on council, and I go to council and she's still sitting there, conflict, huge conflict that happens every single day. People don't say, excuse me, I'm related to Brenda and I don't feel like it can be objective. They feel like I'm going to be a support to Brenda, whether right or wrong. Judgment, but say I have a conflict and to step away. It's a responsible thing to do, and people don't do it. And I wish
Okay, is there, sorry. Has everybody clicked? Has everybody not clicked? Okay. Yeah. And that is because the counselors don't understand their role. And they want to have power.
They don't accept their role.
Yeah.
And that's the key word right there.
Yeah. They want to exert power.
To make a promise or deliver a program or service or money to a community member immediately, that's power.
And that's a vote. And that's a vote.
And,
Yeah.
also, it means that for them, for that brief moment, that fleeting moment, they are more powerful than the best educated and experienced director who has all the experience in the world and credentials behind their name. But you got someone who doesn't even have a grade 12 high school diploma saying, hey, look at me, I can do this.
I can make it happen.
I can make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So how's it going to get paid, and who's going to pay for it, and who's going to do it, and how's it going to get scheduled? And they don't care. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's it.
And we do live in a nice community.
Yeah, exactly, right? That this was Roma. She just like, I love how you ended this. Yeah. Reminds us of what we're why we're here. Oh, we have door prizes. And I'm getting